What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gage. Welcome to the channel. Today, I am very excited to be showing off my pure Lightsworn deck profile from the Edison format. This is specifically a format from the early Synchro era. So we're taking a bit of a time machine all the way back to the early days of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. Lightsworn, the whole strategy is one of the most fun decks to pilot, as it was one of the first decks to implement a strategy around milling, which encourages you to send as many cards from your deck to the graveyard as possible, all to facilitate the main boss monster that is Judgment Dragon. So, before I get into the profile, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And without further ado, I'm just going to hop right into it. So, I am, of course, playing two copies of the main man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Judgment Dragon. Just an absolutely gorgeous card. I picked up the beautiful Japanese Ultimate Rares that I know that the camera is definitely not doing the card justice, but it is very, very beautiful and a sight to behold. And yeah, Judgment Dragon is a beast. The reason you want to play this deck for sure, and the reason why you are encouraged to mill cards into your graveyard, because it does have a summoning condition which says that you must be able to special summon this card by having 4 different Lightsworn names in your graveyard, which allows you to special summon him from your hand. Once you do, the payoff is immense in that you can pay 1,000 measly life points to go ahead and destroy all other cards on the field that are not including himself. So that is a very powerful effect. A lot of the times, once you finally have the ability to get into Judgment Dragon, usually that is how you are going to close out the game, because you're just going to destroy everything on the field. And if your opponent does not have an answer, that is pretty much GG right there. So Judgment Dragon also has a secondary effect where during the end phase, you can mill 4 more cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard. So you do have to be careful, because you do not want to end up milling yourself. So a lot of the times you just have to time it just right to where you can ensure that by the time he hits the field, that is pretty much going to spell game for your opponent. What is the most busted part about this card for sure is the fact that his ability to destroy the field is not once per turn. So you can continue to pay 1,000 to continuously destroy the field if the opportunity comes up for it. So there might be times where in the main phase you nuke the field, you go into battle, you swing, you end up getting Gorsed, for example. All right, cool. Well, main 2, you're going to go ahead and pay another 1,000 to wipe the field again. So that is insanely broken, and the reason why you want to play this deck, and the reason why he's probably at 2 copies to begin with in the Edison format. So yeah, you have to play the deck, and that is why I am playing the 2 Judgment Dragon. To help facilitate the milling, I am playing 3 copies of Yugioh Lightsworn Hunter, just a very good staple monster in the format by far, but this is the deck in which he was made to be played in. It, on flip, allows you to target a card on the field and destroy it, which is just very good on its own, but then after that you send the top 3 cards of the deck to the grave. So a common theme that you will see with a lot of these cards is that they will have a ability to help you get cards from the deck into the graveyard. So Yugioh is right at home in this deck, and that is why I am choosing to play 3 copies. I'm also playing 3 copies of Lila, the Lightsworn Sorcerer. I've seen builds in which it bounces back from being able to play 1, 2, 3 of them. I personally like playing 3 because of its utility and essentially acting as an additional Mystical Space Typhoon in being able to target a spell or trap your opponent controls. You can then change this battle position, so most of the time it will be going from attack to defense position, and then you could go ahead and just destroy your opponent's spell or trap card. And it does have the ability where during the end phase, it mills the top 3 cards of the deck. So you can start to see a little bit of a trend with these Lightsworn monsters, where usually they will have one main effect and then a secondary effect that allows you to mill cards from the deck. So I personally like having 3. 1,700 is also a respectable stat line in terms of attack power. A lot of the times it's going to end up just going to defense anyway, but that is okay, because a lot of the time it's already done its job and being able to remove a monster, a spell or trap rather, that your opponent controls. There are more times where if you have the read that your opponent's back row might be a bluff, you can actually use the the Lila to swing into your opponent's monster first, and then after taking out their monster, putting it into defense position to then take out a spell or trap that your opponent controls, essentially getting you a nice 2-for-1. So there are moments in which if you do decide to use Lila more aggressively, you can end up being rewarded for it. So I personally like playing the 3 copies, and I would recommend it for other people to try as well. I am also playing 2 copies of Jane, Lightsworn Paladin, which is meant to be just a very strong beat stick. Essentially, it says if this attacks an opponent's monster, it gains 300 attack during the damage step only. So that is a respectable 2100 stat line, putting you at Cyber Dragon numbers. And it says during the end phase, you could send the top 2 cards of the deck to the grave. So really, you just want to use it as another Lightsworn name to help facilitate your JD. It is a beat stick that also can send cards from the deck to the grave. I'm playing 2 copies of Aaron, Lightsworn Monk. It says before damage calculation, when it attacks a defense position monster, you just straight up shuffle it into the deck, which is a very unique way of being able to deal with your opponent's threats that might just so happen to be in defense position. It also says during the end phase, you mill 3 cards. So again, you're just starting to see that a lot of these cards have that ability to mill and help you get the monsters that you need from the deck into the graveyard. I'm playing 2 copies of Celestia, and this is a amazing secondary card that you can go into because it says when you tribute it by tributing a Lightsworn monster, you can send the top 4 cards of the deck to the grave and then target up to 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy them. So it is unfortunately a level 5, so there are going to be instances in which you might end up bricking on it if you cannot stick a Lightsworn, but you are rewarded if you can manage to stick a Lightsworn, because Celestia is just a powerhouse on her own, just like JD, because of the fact that you can get a nice 2-for-1 if you time it properly. So it's also a 2300 attack, which is pretty solid as well. So yeah, I like the fact that we have just another bomb in our deck to be able to put pressure on our opponent. I'm also playing 2 copies of Wolf. Now, this is both one of the best cards in the deck and the worst card in the deck because it can't be normal summoned. However, you can, if it's sent from the deck to the graveyard, you can straight up just special summon it from the grave. So that is the reason why we play it. I personally hate playing 3. It just increases the likelihood that you see it in your opening hand, and unfortunately, it's just a brick. Now, there are instances in which you are able to take advantage of the Wolf being in the hand. You can discard it off of something like your Lumina. You can end up discarding it off of a Solar Recharge or a Monster Reincarnation. I like it at 2. I see it enough, but at the end of the day, if I don't end up seeing it, it's not the end of the world. And as I alluded to, I am playing the Lumina, which is at 1 in this format, and it's for a reason, because once per turn, you can discard a card, target a level 4 lower Lightsworn monster in the grave, which is most of your Lightsworns, and special summon it. And then once during the turn, send the top 3 cards of the deck to the grave. So this is just very powerful because it gets back a lot of your monsters that you've already seen up until this point, from your Lila to your Jane. So yeah, I love the fact that Lumina is at our disposal. It sucks that it's at 1, but it's we take what we can get. And I'm playing 1 copy of Geralth, really just to be made as an additional Lightsworn name. However, there are going to be times where maybe you just have to summon it because you need to stick a monster onto the field. 1850 is a respectable stat line for sure, but it does have a niche effect where if each time a card is sent from the deck to the graveyard by the effect of a Lightsworn monster you control except itself, you could send the top 2 cards of the deck to the grave, and then if you do end up milling a Lightsworn off of his own effect, you could draw 1 card for each Lightsworn that you milled. So the fact is that you have to have this in combination with another Lightsworn name, which is why I'm only playing the 1. But if you are able to stick this along with another Lightsworn, and you do just so happen to mill some Lightsworns off of this effect, you have the potential to get some free draws, which of course we love getting. So Geralth is really just meant to be another name for the JD, but does have some utility in niche circumstances. I'm also playing the 1 copy of Arcus, which admittedly is another Lightsworn name, just so that we could set up our JD. However, it does actually have a rather useful effect in that Lightsworn monsters you control cannot be targeted by effects. And then during the end phase, you mill 2, of course. But that prevention from targeting is actually really good because there are so many cards in this format that target. You have, of course, Ryko, which a lot of other decks just tech for the utility of being able to target a card on the field and destroy it, which Arcus prevents. But also, you could stop things like Brain Control, which is a very popular staple spell card in the format. So Arcus is kind of the cherry on top of a nice board to ensure that you are protected from your opponent's targeting abilities. So I do actually like summoning this in some instances just to prevent my opponent from being able to use those cards against me. And then for the honorary Lightsworn, I'm playing 2 copies of the Honest, very powerful card that says if your light monster battles, during the damage step, you can go ahead and discard this card, so it's one of the original hand traps, to go ahead and gain the attack of the monster that your monster is battling, ensuring that you will live that battle. So just a very strong card. It's at 2 in this format. Otherwise, we would be playing 3 for absolute sure. And yeah, though the only downside is that it does not it's not Lightsworn in name, it might as well be an honorary Lightsworn considering the deck that we're playing. So yeah, you definitely want to play 2 copies of Honest. And we are playing 1 Card Trooper, which is just a very solid card for the deck because you can, once per turn, choose a number from 1 to 3. Most of the time it's going to be 3. You can then send that many cards from the top of the deck to the grave, and it gains 500 attack for each card sent. So a lot of the times it will be a 1900 attack monster that has an additional effect where if it is destroyed and sent to the grave, whether, by battle or from a card effect by Torrential Tribute or Mirror Force or whatever, you could just draw a card, which it's nice that it has the ability to replace itself. So though it is not a Lightsworn, it does help to facilitate your game plan in giving you additional ways to be able to send cards to the graveyard. So Card Trooper is right at home in this deck. And then for cards that have utility in the grave, I am playing the 1 Plague Spreader Zombie along with the Necro Gardener. Just solid options all around. This being in the graveyard, being able to banish itself to protect you from being attacked by one of your opponent's monsters. And then the Plague Spreader just having the ability to special summon itself from the grave by putting a card from your hand to the top of the deck. And it gives you tuner access, which means that the deck does have the ability to go into synchro monsters. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is nice to know that you can have these options, especially since you want to have payoffs in your graveyard for all of the milling that you're doing. And last but not least, I'm playing 1 Gores, just a staple card in the format. Your opponent always has to respect it, and you want to be able to make sure that you can prevent yourself from just straight up being OTK'd. Gores just being able to, if your opponent attacks directly and you control no cards, you can just straight up special summon Gores and then gain a token that has the attack of the monster that essentially attacked you. So that is just very powerful. Again, you really just don't want to be caught with your pants down in an open board where your opponent is just getting in free damage and then you end up losing before you had the opportunity to actually fight back. So Gores is great at being able to save you in those scenarios. And that is it for the monsters. Most of the deck is monsters, and with good reason, because we want to ensure that we have as many different Lightsworns as possible. So for the spells, we are playing the absolutely broken Charge of the Light Brigade. It's unfortunately at 1 in this format, but probably for good reason. It has a very strong ability where straight up you can send the top 3 cards of the deck to the grave to add a level 4 lower Lightsworn from the deck to your hand, which is pretty much most of our Lightsworns. So this really helps to get the strategy going, and so yeah, you have to play the 1 charge. And for consistency tools, we're also playing 3 copies of Solar Recharge, which says you can discard a Lightsworn monster, draw 2 cards, and then send the top 2 cards of the deck to the grave. Again, just being able to get cards into the grave and drawing cards is something that we really appreciate, so Solar Recharge is a must. And I'm teching 3 copies of Book of Moon, really just to act as a way to be able to prevent our opponent from being able to make plays themselves. If you see them going for a tuner, for a synchro play, you can just book one of their tuners before they have the opportunity to use it for a synchro summon. If you are facing a Floodgate monster, you don't want to be caught with your pants down, you can just go ahead and book it, put it face down defense position, and not have to deal with it. And there are some instances in which if your opponent does end up leaving you with a set Ryko, you can go ahead and flip the Ryko and then book it face down so that you could potentially use it a second time. So Book of Moon is just very versatile, so that is why I enjoy playing the 3 copies, both as a offensive and defensive tool. And we are playing 3 copies of Monster Reincarnation, which is very, very versatile because it has a very simple effect where you could discard a card to target a monster in the grave and add it to your hand. This is the reason why we're really not worried about us potentially milling the Judgment Dragon itself, because since I'm playing 3 copies of Monster Reincarnation, even if we do manage to mill the JD, we could just always get it back when we are fully set up and ready to be able to special summon it. So I personally think that this card is a must. Even if you do end up already having the Judgment Dragon in hand, this just means that you have utility to grab pretty much anything that you need in a pinch. So this is just one of the best late game cards because from all the milling that you're doing, you're pretty much going to have any monster at your disposal. So yeah, Monster Reincarnation, it just feels like it was almost made for this deck. I'm playing 1 copy of Pot of Avarice, and this is simply so that we don't accidentally mill ourselves out. With all the milling that we're doing, there is the potential that we end up milling too much, and you don't want to end up losing the game just because you ran out of cards in the deck. So shuffling 5 cards, monsters in the graveyard back into the deck to draw 2 cards is great at preventing the self-milling from happening and making sure that you do not run out of cards in your deck, and of course getting a nice 2 free cards out of it is a nice consolation too. I'm playing 1 Mystical Space Typhoon, pretty self-explanatory. We do not want to run into our opponent's bottomlesses, their mirror forces. Just being able to have an option to remove the very powerful traps in this format is mandatory. And of course, Heavy Storm, we're really not playing all that many traps ourselves. It's mostly just a monster and spell-based strategy, and Heavy Storm doesn't really have too much of a negative impact on us. I'm playing the 1 Brain Control, as I mentioned earlier. This is probably the most ban-worthy card in Edison format, simply because it says pay 800, target a face-up monster your opponent controls, and you just take it. You could then use it for a tribute summon. You could use it for synchro summoning. You could use it to attack with. You could use its effect. The fact that Brain Control does not limit what you can actually do with the monster that you take is one of the reasons why it's as broken as it is. And then I am teching the 1 copy of Beckoning Light. It says discard your hand. Then for each card you discarded, you can add a light monster from the graveyard to your hand, which is just very nice utility, especially in the late game when most of the deck is in the graveyard. You really don't mind just discarding your hand, especially if it means that you can end up grabbing something like your Judgment Dragon. So that's it for the main deck. As for the extra deck, for those that might be familiar with Edison format, the format uses a lot of just very powerful staple extra deck monsters that a lot of decks can utilize. So I end up sharing a lot of the extra deck cards from other decks that I play in Edison format. So you will see a lot of usual suspects that are just very generically good synchro monsters. And the reason why you play so many of these different synchro monsters is because, yes, we have the ability to go into our own synchro monsters since we do have Plague Spreader Zombie in the deck. But the reason we play so many different levels is because of the fact that we do play Brain Control. So there are going to be instances in which maybe you end up taking your opponent's monster and then using your own Plague Spreader to then make a synchro play out of your opponent's monster. So you want to ensure that you have a wide variety of options at your disposal, and there are so many very, very good monsters, synchro monsters rather, in Edison format that you can utilize. So guys, that is going to be it from me. I really appreciate if you took the time to check out my profile. This deck is a ton of fun. Let me know if this was a deck that you have played or even continue to play. It's funny because it did end up getting new support rather recently, a few months ago, in one of the core sets that ended up making it viable again. And I just think that Lightsworn is an eternal deck. It's always going to be relevant, and I feel like a lot of people have good memories with this deck, and I know I certainly have. There is just something fun about being able to just gamble and play a deck that is really based on RNG, and if it does turn out in your favor, you can end up just blowing your opponent out of the water, and yeah, it's just a ton of fun. So guys, that's going to be it from me. Again, thank you so much. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, GG.